At rover.com, you can find pet sitters. There was a dozen of them right in that puzzle.
A great resource.
Reviews and stuff.
Okay, I have 10 o'clock. I'm going to call the Isabella County Board of Commissioners Finance and Administration Committee meeting, hybrid meeting to order. Call to order. I just did that. Call to the public. I'm going to spend. We have a lovely no studio audience today. So I'll go to, do we have anybody on the virtual?
We do not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
So in the interest of time, I will close the public comment section and move to number 3. Consider accepting and placing on file the fiscal year 2022 first quarter financial report as presented.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This morning, we are at first quarter fiscal 22, so October, November, December, and 25% is the big number that we're looking for here. And we always see that very scary single-digit number on the revenue side of things, but we never get concerned about that because we know that our operating levy for the county is on the summer tax bill. And so that doesn't go out until July 1. So we are well into our fiscal year before our revenues even start coming in. So the fact that our total revenues are at 6.38% is not concerning at this time. You can see taxes at a whopping 0.65%. Everything else is kind of holding steady. We are up for fines and forfeitures, which we had really seen that decline in recent years. And so the budgeted amount was set more conservatively. And so it's good to see that we're actually reaching that amount. Everything else is kind of in line with what we're figuring. The transfers in from those other funds are at 0% because we don't transfer in from the CPL fund, transfer in from other funds. Melissa, I believe that's the registered deeds fund, that 12,000. Those are done generally at one time later in the year. And then the delinquent tax revolving, we haven't taken any monies. We haven't transferred any monies from that at this point either. You know, March is the time when the most cash would be needed in delinquent tax fund. And so we've kind of thought the best theory there is to transfer those funds later in the year if we need to. As far as expenditures, remember, we still want to see things fall under that 25% mark. And really across the board, expenditures as a total are at 22.18, so doing really well. If we walk through some of those departments, you can see they're all in line. Administration is over budget. That has to do with an unbudgeted PTO payout. Really, cooperative extension, that's going to look high, almost 50%, and that's because we probably should change the name from cooperative extension there actually to MSU extension. Cooperative extension is quite an aged name for that, but that is our MSU extension, and we do have 4 payments to them each year, and we do pay those up front. So that's why they look a little over budget, but it's just because we've paid the first 2 quarterly installments of that contract. Really looking through this, expenses are well under budget. Of course, Marine Patrol is at 0% this time of year, not a lot of activity out on those lakes. Drains at large, the county portion of that has not been paid yet. And so that's why that budgeted number is close to 0. If you go to the 3rd page or the 2nd page of expenditures, substance abuse is at 0%. That is because once we receive those monies in, half of them go to substance abuse, and we just haven't received those revenues in yet for the current year. But we will reach that budgeted amount. That is a set amount. Those those get transferred out when we receive them, and we just haven't received them yet as of December 31st for this report. Just looking through, Veterans Affairs is a little over their 25%. They're at 34%, and that has to do with that County Veteran Service Fund grant that we get, and those grant expenditures already having been, the bulk of them been paid for the bus wraps and the other advertising. So with those grant expenditures already having been paid, that's what's bumping that up a bit. And as you can see, nothing's spent out of contingency yet, and the transfers out are all at 25% except for that MIDC transfer out, which we do all at once, our local portion at the beginning of the year. Again, setting good overall total expenditures, just over 22%. Go to the last page of the report. These are some of our other major funds that we do a revenue and expenditure on. Parks and Rec, of course, they're at just under 5% for revenues. Again, we don't get too concerned about that in the winter time. Their revenues won't even begin to come in until late spring. Expenditures at 14%. And of course, that'll bump up again for parks as they get into their season. Front of the court, 9% revenues and about 20% expenditures. That is always due to timing and getting reimbursed from the state for our expenses there. Commission on Aging, 3% of revenues and 20% of expenditures. I would think that the revenues for Commission on Aging, again, those tax revenues aren't going to come until later in the year. So again, not alarming. Child care revenues at 15% and expenditures at 14%. Again, I believe that is timing with the state. And Melissa, please jump in if I'm off on these. Central Dispatch, their revenues looks really close to tax revenues, although they don't have taxes for revenues. They have that surcharge, and those come from dang near 100 phone companies every quarter, and they lag quite a bit. So I believe recent revenues that we've gotten in were attributed to last year and were booked back. And so we're just waiting on timing to get revenues for this year. Expenditures for Central Dispatch are on track. They are a little over their 25% at this point, but that's because at the beginning of the year is when they do their tornado siren maintenance. And I think these on a 5-year schedule to replace those. So every year, a number of those get replaced, and then they're all replaced over a 5-year period. So he's already done that radio siren maintenance in the beginning of the year. And so that's why his expenditures are a little up. Inspections, right on track, 25% revenues and 22% expenditures. And recycling actually looking really, really well for first quarter of our fiscal 22 with over 25% of revenues. Jake, I know you're smiling. I can see you out there in Zoom land. And expenditures just under 20%. Recycling has seen some fantastic commodity prices lately and some pretty good volumes too. So they're sitting really good on revenues. I know they did have some trouble getting some manpower employees. They're getting more on track now with them, but I know that was part of the reason their expenditures were down in the first quarter. It's just, they just didn't have weren't able to gain the manpower employees that they needed. So are there any questions about anything in the general fund or those other funds that we went over? Yes, sir.
I know we look at this every year, the taxes lag. We have to support operation of the budget with other sources of funds. We have sufficient fund balance to support that, because I know last year we came down to the point of almost not being able to cover our costs.
We do have sufficient fund balance. Now that's different than cash flow, right? And it's usually a cash flow concern that we have, is making sure we've got enough cash to pay the bills, to make the ongoing payroll. And that's when we end up transferring monies into general fund from other sources for cash purposes. Our fund balance is solid, but when you start to get your revenues in the third and fourth quarter, that cash runs really thin until
Can't use
it starts
the,
coming
the
in.
Fund balance to support operation on a temporary basis.
You can, but it's not always cash. Fund balance is not always cash. The good news for the county this year, and I would presume going forward for the next couple of years, is all the ARPA dollars that we've received and will receive. Those are cash. That's a big cash influx that'll help us to manage that going forward. Yes. It's tough. I know in other counties that I've worked in, the cash flow wasn't there to manage those revenues coming so late in the fiscal year. And the county would actually have to take out what's called a tax anticipation note. And so you would have that additional interest expense every year to be able to bring in the cash that you needed to run your operations. Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. Same theory. We do now, since the beginning of the year, myself and our two accountants have been meeting Monday mornings at 9 o'clock. We go over this, a revenue expenditure report of general fund to make sure there's nothing really off track. And we also look at a balance sheet, and that balance sheet shows us those cash reserves. So if nothing else, we will be out in front of it quicker going forward to see it coming.
Anticipate some of what's your comfort level as far as fund level, fund balance level that we're comfortable with. What is your cash flow? You have a number?
What a great question. I think we have, I would say my cash flow, you get under $1 million and that gets very, very nervous, right?
Payroll, how much is payroll?
We are up around $750,000 for payroll. And
The former administrative controller always lists the emphasis from business rules. Three first rules of running the business is pay your employees, and pay your employees.
yes,
So that's why I asked that question.
Yes.
So you always want, always,
Yes.
never on payroll.
yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Or a pension, you know,
Yeah,
or your
well,
bond.
you have to, yeah.
Those are my big three:
Yeah, yeah.
payroll, pension, and bond.
Get
Mhm,
out of that.
mhm. Yes.
Those are all, if you do
Yes.
that, that will.
Yes, sir.
So,
Yes, sir. We'll stay away from that for
yeah,
sure.
please do.
Promise.
Those
Mhm.
commodities prices must fluctuate.
They
So
really
I've
do.
read that, funding report for the
They really do. And there had been a high up for the natural plastic. So think like your milk jugs, that natural color. Those were up just over $1 a pound in this kind of period we're looking at. And then just the other day, Jake told me, I said, how are we doing? He said, oh, it's at 52 cents. I said, 52 cents, that's a big swing, but that's it. You're exactly right. It's very volatile. And you don't know. Usually they tick down or tick up, but that one, boom.
The revenue.
Mhm.
Revenue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. When the commissioners speak, we can't hear them. We want to, this is our speaker here. So when we speak, let's just try to project to the middle of the. Still not.
Any idea what's driving the fines and forfeitures to be a little more than expected?
Other than a very conservative budget number, no, other than maybe more activity. You know, we're not on lockdown with COVID anymore. No. Still no microphone? let me do the test the microphone and speaker if you bear with me. Good morning.
Test, test, test.
Hello?
Testing.
I'll turn that volume way up. Yeah, maybe the laptops are,
Test,
'Cause-
test, test.
oh, here, sorry.
Test, test, test.
That is
Morning.
better. That's better. I can hear Nicole clear as day, but the commissioners, it's a little bit tougher. But that was better, Commissioner Horton.
My family never usually accuses me of speaking softly, so that's because I just say what comes out of my mouth.
They don't complain when they can't hear you.
I have
either.
Blither's disease, usually nothing between the ear, the brain and the mouth just flows, but public meetings, I control it, so.
There, well, I think part of the reason was your laptops were in the way of it, honestly.
Okay.
Thanks for the feedback, you guys.
Any more questions to the county administrator controller in regards to the 3-month first quarter financial report? Okay, I'll make a motion. We consider accepting and placing on file the fiscal year 2022 first quarter financial report as presented.
Support.
There a motion and support. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. That will go forward to the next county commission meeting. Next up, the 3-year financial forecast presentation and discussion. And we have Steve Kernovic on the Zoom message here because Steve is fortunate and very nice to come in on his vacation time to give us a 3-year financial forecast. Steve, take it
Awesome.
away.
Actually, I'm just going to preface that just a little bit. Normally you see Steve's written report that follows the quarterly financial report. And I asked him going forward, instead of that, to do a walkthrough of the 3-year forecast so that we can make sure that that tool continues to be utilized. I think it'll be more valuable for you if you want him to go back to the written report. I'm sure he'd be more than happy to. But this time I asked him to do this instead. So I do want to talk just a brief moment about why we dusted off the 3-year forecast, the 3-year budget forecast model. Steve had presented this, I want to say a year ago in March, although it seems way longer ago than that. When it was presented, it was a great tool. We just didn't get it back out and keep it dusted off and keep it updated. And where that became really obvious that we needed to do that is I continued to work with USDA and get them everything they needed on the financials for the Isabella County Sheriff's Office and Correctional Facility project. As USDA required more and more information from me, it became clear that we needed to dust off this model to see what could our general fund budget truly absorb in terms of a bond payment going forward. I think we've tossed around the number with a $41.5 million project that equates to about $1.5 million bond payment every year. And from the financials that we were providing to USDA, we had taken the turbine revenues, we had taken the MERS defined benefit payments, how they'll fall off in a few years and how the turbine revenue does depreciate over time. And we took those as like a snapshot in time, if you will, and we said these revenues will help cover that bond payment. And we took it out for 40 years to show that. But what USDA wanted from us was, okay, while you're able to afford these bond payments with those revenues, what's the rest of the county doing? How's the general fund performing? And they wanted to see cash flows to that regard as well. So as I provided more information to them and worked with the financial advisor on these documents that USDA needed, it was starting to become clear to me that there was not going to be $1.5 million freed up in the budget for a bond payment. If you consider just the wage classification implementation alone of close to $1 million of general fund wages, and then consider the turbine revenue that will level off at about 800,000 a year, you can see how there isn't quote unquote extra to fund much, right? So we really had a budget problem that we needed to look at and forecast out. We know those MERS payments were dropping off. How does that work with a wage increase on top of, you know, a cost of living increase on top of the wage increase? How does this look over time? And we knew we had the tool to use to do that. So I did ask Steve Krinovic to please dust that off, and he's been working hard through January to get that where it is today, to show this to you. I am happy to report that, you know, when these things start, you start out in the hole, and then you start to throw all the knowledge at it that you have, and you end up in a deeper hole, right? But we kept throwing knowledge at it and come up with some ideas for revenues, ideas for less expenditures, and Steve will talk about those assumptions that we made working through this. But we did get to a good place where I think we have freed up some general fund dollars, and we're going to be able to afford a fine project. But Steve, can you think of anything else I should mention before you take it away?
No, I think that was all, all good, Nicole. And I think you're right. I think the key was, and actually I looked back and we started this in September, or the original one I had was September of 2020. And I think we did dust it off in about March-ish of 2021. And I don't remember if we rolled that out to the commissioners or not, but yeah, so I mean, it's been a year and a half when we initially did this, and then we didn't do a whole lot of updating to it, and as you said, a lot has changed. I mean, a lot has changed. You look at the pandemic and all of its reduced revenues, and I think the turbine revenues came in differently than were projected, and like you said, the implementation of the wage classification and drove expenditures up, and then you throw ARPA dollars in there and all the other COVID, so I think Commissioner Horton has said that many times is it's like, who would have thought 2-3 years ago that we'd have all these things, and so I think there's a substantial amount of things that have happened. That when I put it up here, the forecast looks the same presentation wise, but the numbers are substantially different. So I think that's the key. So I will, if you want me to, I'll go ahead and screen share.
Yes.
Okay. So here's the template that we started with. I'm going to hide you guys so I can see my screen better. And so like I said, this looks similar to what we saw in the past. But the presentation wise is similar, but looking at it, the layout is the same. So you can see that, we basically use the same concept of, the way we built everything. And, we built it off of the 2022 budget. And then we factored in, a lot of those additional expenditures and revenues. And I've lost you guys. So just a second,
We still hear you and see you.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know why I minimized you and I completely lost you here. So let me figure out what I'm doing wrong bring you back, but well, I'll just keep talking. And Nicole, like I said, I can hear you very well. So if there's something that you guys that that you need of me, just Nicole, you holler real loud and I'll stop, because I can hear you well. The commissioners, like I said, I can hear them pretty good, but I can hear you very well. So if there's a need for me to stop and a question, feel free to holler at me, and we'll do that. So, but again, this was built off of the 2022 budget, and then we factored in, the expected changes, as Nicole said, the carrying out of the wind turbines, and then the tapering off and the depreciation of their revenues. I mean, that's factored in, and so, so we'll kind of touch on those changes, and we'll go as deep into the weeds as you want, and I won't go deep into the weeds if you don't want, but we'll go through it as much as possible. And I think the key to remember here is, as we took that 2020 and we, moved it forward into 2022 and so forth. The real key that I think we found is this, that little disclaimer that you see at the bottom of, in pink on each of these pages, as far as, past performance may not be indicative of future results. And I think that's the key, because, as we projected things out and did things and we thought, oh, this is where we're going to shake out, things changed. And as we talked, and so, it is definitely a different world, that we live in. And so I think that's a key to keep in mind. And then, as like I said, as we go and as we talk about this and as we share, going forward, we have spent, as Nicole mentioned, we spent a substantial amount of time, reviewing this and looking it over, and between everybody, Nicole and Chris and Melissa and myself, and going through everything, we've spent a lot of time looking at this, but it's not perfect. And I'll be the first to admit, is there's, because we were so deep into the weeds. So if you gentlemen see something, that looks odd or looks off, or just doesn't seem like it makes sense, please let us know, because like I said, I can guarantee that this, is not perfect. And also, as Nicole mentioned, the Baker Tilly analysis that was done to look at cash flow projections and so forth. We tried to align this with that projection, just so we had one, continuity, and two, comfort that we weren't missing anything, and we basically built this model twice, kind of, and so we aligned those two documents to make sure. And I'm not sure, Nicole, did that get shared with the commissioners?
The Baker Tilly?
Yes.
No.
Okay. Well, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be, but basically, if you look here, our bottom line, if you were to look at that Baker Tilly sheet, our bottom lines here, kind of on these projections for 23, 24, and 25, are within $1 or $2, I think, of the Baker Tilly. So, so again, I think we have some consistency there with this presentation and so forth. So, and so this is that very top, summary page that we, have looked at before, and we'll go into the weeds a little bit and go into some of the details. But as you can see here, looking at 23, 24, and 25. Taking revenues and expenditures at a very high level, but with some breakouts, because I think that was the key, is being able to break out, like Nicole mentioned, the turbines, as you can see there in on line 9. We added this usage of fund balance line. As you can see, there's some usages of fund balance into 25, and then we split out the larger components of the transfers, delinquent tax, and then other funds for revenue. So that's pretty consistent with the format that you see for the budget, but with a little more detail, on some of those a higher profile, I guess, maybe you'd want to say higher profile lines with revenues. And then expenditures, again, pretty consistent, salaries and benefits, then pretty much everything else in operations, capital outlay, and then MERS, and then building in the debt payments and continued transfers out. So as you can, as you can see here, for on the revenue side of things, we have various things built in here, and one of those is a usage of fund balance, as you can see. And so that usage of fund balance in 24 and 25, I don't know if it's the right terminology or not, but I kind of use that, to say a usage of fund balance in the lean years, until we kind of get over that hump with the MERS lowering in fiscal year 27, which, you can't see on this 3-year, but takes you out to 27. So in 27, those payments begin to decrease, and so we were showing, a usage to kind of, again, get us through those lean years of some usage of fund balance to kind of to keep a positive, positive, quote, bottom line, so to speak, and looking at that. So that's one of the items that's incorporated in there. Just to kind of throw out to you there as if you were to look at that longer, because I know that was one of our concerns as we built this, was looking at when do we kind of right the ship, and that type of thing with those what I'm calling those leaner years, and that happens out there in about 27 when the lowering of the MERS payments, and then from what I projected, again, based on estimates and so forth, is that approximately 3 years post that decrease in MERS payments, we kind of recoup that fund balance that we had usages in 24, 25, 26, 27. We have a recoupment of that. Again, I don't know if that's the proper terminology or not, but in about 2030, we kind of right things and get back to where we were before we started utilizing fund balance. So I wanted to look at that to make sure that in my mind I could feel comfortable, and we could feel comfortable as a group, as the team that looked at this, and as we did that. Again, it was a usage in those lean years, but we do, kind of turn things around after the MERS payments get a little more manageable.
Steve, I'm going to hop in there just a second too, because that was one of the really concerning things when I was working with the financial advisor at Baker Tilly. USDA wanted a 5-year cash flow and we just couldn't make it work. And you're seeing, commissioners, part of why we couldn't make that work is because of the fund balance that is necessary in these next years going forward. Hopefully before this meeting's over, I'll be able to show you the spreadsheet, and it's not in its entirety necessarily, but 10 years out, to where you can see, okay, it's okay if we're using an excessive amount of fund balance, but I would consider an excessive amount of fund balance on the front end, because as Steve just said, we really do recoup that over time. We can't make it work in those first few years, but when all the other things happen that we know are going to happen and those MERS payments fall off, even with declining turbine revenues, even with increasing wages, that 10-year, we right the ship in that 10 years and we make it work. So hopefully I'll be able to show you that spreadsheet before the meeting's over too, not just this 3-year one that looks, holy crap, Nicole, this is not the answer. You've brought another problem, it looks like, but trust me, the answer is out there in the
Right.
future years. Thanks, Steve.
Yep. Yeah, no. And like I said, I mean, that was always was the concern, is that, how do things level back out? And so, like I said, I think that, and don't quote me on this specifically, but I want to say, we have that utilization of fund balance, and then it brings fund balance, kind of our projected estimate of unassigned fund balance. And we've talked about those terms, roughly, brings it down to about $5 million, and so it isn't down extremely low. I mean, it's lower, but we do see that kind of that righting of the ship as we go forward. So that was, so that's that new is line 16 there is kind of a new line that we added. And then, and just to kind of point out before we get into more of the details, we do show, like I said, transfer in from the delinquent tax fund of about $500,000. We just kind of projected, I know that's been different in the past. But that was kind of the number that we settled on, going forward, and felt comfortable building that into the projections. So that's included in there. And then also, as you recall, those MERS payments continue to increase. And I think Nicole or Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that number was 300-ish thousand, and the general funds component of that was about 280,000. So we built that additional MERS component into the expenditure section of the spreadsheet, and then also the debt payments, and I think I believe it's and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Nicole, but I think it's 18 to 24 months is the kind of the length of the project, the expectation of the project to construction. And so there would not be a debt payment in 2023. If the project got started in 2022, it would be done about 2023. And the first debt payment would be 2024. And I think that was a USDA requirement to build. So that's why there's not a debt payment in 2023 as you look at that, and so that number there is zero. And then MERS projected for, per Nicole's request for, the borrowing amount, was just over, $1 million at $1,008,000. And so split that out separately to reflect that, as a separate line. So you could see, that in there also. And then there's also, and just kind of go backtrack a little bit, but there's also capital outlay, is broken out separately. So we try to expect or anticipate some various different things. I think buildings and ground, or the for the office and the county building, had various different things that they were looking at with a 5-year projection on capital outlay, and that's got some other departmental capital outlay included in there. So there is a component of that factored in, factored into the equation too, as we built the forecast. Anything else there, Nicole or Melissa or Chris? Anything that before we kind of look at more of the details that I missed, or some, maybe the commissioners?
Steve, Commissioner Jazinski has a question.
Yes.
Actually, I have 3 questions. The payroll adjustment for annual, is that set at a specific percentage, or, because I know we're looking at inflationary times and we want to make sure we retain our workforce, but what is the percentage that you use to advance the payroll year by year? There
is, and we can jump to that to take a look. And so in here, unless we modified it differently, Commissioner, basically how this works, and if you recall, and I won't go into a lot of the details because I know Commissioner Horton loves the details of spreadsheets and how they work. So I won't go into a lot of that detail. But so for instance, it's driven off of these percentages here at the top. So it's basically a 1% across the board for salaries and benefits. And operational, and then transfers out and so forth, unless we have modified it down here in these areas. So it's a 1% increase, so just for instance, just because it's at the top, and I'm not picking them for any other reason. But if you looked at the trial court, they're at 3,806,000, and it's 1%. And a 1% increase to get to this 3,844,000. Unless there's some other, things that we factored in, in one instance, we factored in a negative because there was an expectation, and I'll use the administrator controller's office as an example. There was an expectation of, drawing a blank on the term, the deputy controller and administrator controller position, wouldn't be filled. And so if that doesn't get filled, well, then that's a decrease, in that particular area. And so we factored those things in. We use that term override, we overrode in certain areas where there might be something that we're aware of. XYZ position is not going to get filled in the ABC department. We factored that in, and that type of thing. So if there was some sort of, negative or decrease in net expenditures, we would have factored that in, and so like, as a, for instance, I can show you, jumped on me there. Here, for instance, so that's like that negative, like we discussed, that's kind of the equivalent of that particular position within administration, as you can see there. So I know that's a very long answer to your question, Commissioner, but it's a 1% factor and with some other things taken into consideration.
Comment on top of that question, that will let my next question. And I apologize if this is something we're going to cover elsewhere, but I think the next two questions probably wouldn't be covered in the spreadsheet elsewhere. I'm just thinking the 1%, looking at what we've done the last 3 years and trying to retain our skilled workforce, is probably going to be inadequate. And if we go beyond that, we're going to have to look at some additional cuts in the operational budget. Is that correct? To balance that out?
Yeah, I mean, if you're right, basically to balance that ship, if things go up, in certain areas, then things would need to be adjusted, down in others, and kind of, also taking into consideration, again, that drop off of MERS in a couple of years, if kind of going back to here, if these expenditure numbers go up, due to, an increase, like you're saying, as far as wages and so forth, then obviously something on the top of the equation has to go up, or something in those expenditure areas would have to go down. And as we know, getting through these leaner years, either that means, additional usage of fund balance, additional transfers in from, delinquent tax, whatever that may be, to kind of balance the equation.
I've had some concern in the past about the administration not talking with the treasurer on DTF projections. And have you had a chance to talk to Treasurer Pickens to get his take on the $500,000 a year transfer in the DTF fund?
I have not. I'm not sure. I guess I'll let Nicole maybe answer that.
I just think it's important. I'm just making that as a statement.
Mhm. Yep.
And
I do think it's important as well, Commissioner, that I'd like to make that statement too. And definitely during the budget process annually, we will be talking with Treasurer Pickens about delinquent tax revolving fund and his comfort level in terms of what could be transferred.
the last question is the capital outlay. I know they chose like 174, 197, 222,000. I think traditionally we spend a whole lot more than that on the police cars and the like. I just wonder if those dollar amounts are adequate to continue to do what we've done in the past. So that doesn't anticipate any emergency spending that comes up.
Right. This does include, I'll just scroll down here just to show you the little bit of the detail. Oops, I missed it. Here we go. So this does include, amounts for, as you can see, Sheriff's Department here. And then so capital, oh goodness, sorry. So it does include, capital outlay for the Sheriff's Department on more than likely, a vehicle, kind of that same rotational process of that. And then various other areas of capital outlay, as we discussed. I know, I think 260. Yeah, so this was something I know that, that was put together for like the courthouse and various different, like a 5-year plan, I think Steve had put together. And so, so we tried to factor those, those items in, into that, that expenditure. And so, kind of looking at what had historically been spent, we tried to build in as best we could, kind of those rotational things. Oh, we need 5 new computers in that department, and they do that every 5 years, or whatever that may be. And so we tried to factor those into the computation as best we could, as best we knew, for to be as realistic as possible within capital outlay. I mean, but you're right, Commissioner. I mean, there's a potential that there could be, something that would come up, that emergency kind of things, or things that unexpected things that could happen that would jump in there.
Steve, didn't we use Facilities Director Steve Shoemaker's 5-year capital improvement list to pull those numbers from?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, that's, yeah.
So if it's on his 5-year, we built it in here. I know some of the bigger capital expenses he wanted to do, we actually have budgeted in the current year, if we're able to, to do those, the roof and the HVAC projects.
Yeah, I think those were ARPA. Am I correct
Yes,
in
sir.
saying that? Okay.
Sorry.
Yes.
You answered my question, we'll let you continue.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a couple questions, and first off, I'd like to say that the 1% model increase for payroll is a little concerning to me as well. And I know that doesn't necessarily translate to what wages are going to increase if there are positions that we hold or don't fill here and there. But I think that might be a little unrealistic. I mean, I don't think we want to dig ourselves back into the type of hole that we were in 5 years ago in regard to where wages were, and then have to catch up again. That's my concern with that. The turbine revenues, and I know that this was the first year that we were going to see those at 100%. And have they come in where we expected them to? And then are these years built off of that?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and again, maybe Nicole could answer that better, but I know that she and Chris and Melissa, they spent quite a bit of time. And like I said, those are different. If you were to look back at that, initial spreadsheet that we did, the one that had turbine revenue and MERS and debt payments and so forth calculated into it, these numbers are different, and I think after, those numbers came through to equalization, I think the ladies did the calculations to determine those, determine those numbers. And I believe, let me just look here quickly. Yeah. So, 2022, am I correct, Nicole or Melissa or Chris, to say that 2.1, as you can see there on the screen, 2.162 million for 2022, that's the most up-to-date info that we have, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Pete, I'm sorry, Melissa. Pete, Preston, and I just were texting this morning. I believe that those values were due from DTE yesterday. And so he said it is his #1 priority. So the personal property tax statements just came in. So we will very, very soon know what that number is for certain.
But we don't know yet.
Correct.
But we will.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep, that is budget. The number that Steve is showing you there is budgeted.
Right. So, yeah. So from there, we take that 2.1, whatever that was, 2,162,000 and project it, because that's the, oh, goodness, sorry. That is that, is that decrease. I can't recall, is that 80?
Yes.
80?
80%.
80.
Mhm.
So yeah, so then
It's
it,
a 20% drop the second year. Yes.
yeah. And then so it digresses from there.
Yes.
That's all I have.
I just have a couple questions real quick, Steve. You got, Nicole, I know we're gonna get into I wrote down 3, 5, 7, and 10. So I know you just took that right off my list here. I don't do too much doing here. Commissioner Hope or Chairman Hope asked in regards to the turbine revenue, how accurate that was. He took that off my list. The wage and job increases in the wage, or excuse me, the taxes, let's see, your projections for wage and benefits, the 1%, and I think Commissioner Hope touched on this, is that's a 1%, that's like a blend of everything, positives and negatives. That was factoring in increases in healthcare, increases in wages, like cost of livings and everything, offset by whatever, I say retirements of some senior work people and getting hired in with lower cost employees, for lack of a better term. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, and that's a good point. It doesn't take into account that senior employee A is going to be replaced by junior employee B.
So
They're
we're
going to
not
go
fact-
back to
we're
the
not-
start
so
of the
we're not-
wage
we're not
scale.
tying ourselves
Mhm.
in when we look at that 1%.
No.
We're not saying we can't, that's not just a 1% for wage increase every year. That's a 1% blend of everything put in together. So I think Commissioner Hope, 1% kind of sounds low, but I guess you're gonna have to see how has it been factored in? Let me ask you this, sitting here today, what have we done the last 3 years looking back? What's our blend been? What percentage?
That's a great question.
I'm not sure. Let me just see if I can.
Because if we're sitting at 2 or 3%, that 1% does look a little low, but if we're sitting here at 1%, maybe we're spot on in that. I don't know. I guess that's just one question I had.
Yeah, and we can do that to the spreadsheet. We had those calculations, I think, on the original one, and I hid that column, and I am fearful that the calculation might not be correct. So I hate to, I hate to show that, but we can.
Yeah, I don't want to spend, I think that's a number, if you're gonna use that 1%, I think.
Yep.
Looking backwards, maybe 3 years to get a blend on that, what it looks like. And then it does take in the COVID year, so it could be goofy there too, but especially since we've had our wage and job, maybe 1 year, maybe what this last year could be indicative. Also too, and then maybe I can turn this to the administrator controller. This is based off the bond payment debt is based off borrowing at the time 41.5, which projects out to be about 60 million. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are you basing that off of 41.5?
No, sir. We kind of worked it back to say what might be available for a bond payment, if you will. It's about $1 million. That $1 million gets us $27 million borrow
Okay,
from the
that's
USDA for 40 years.
That's where I was going with, what I was seeking is how far back, I know we're projecting the cost of 41.5. Instead of borrowing the 41.5, you're basing if we can work ourselves back, so we're only borrowing.
27 is what I'm saying that the general fund could absorb going forward based off of this forecast and the work we've been doing over the course of the last
So
5 or
we've
6
got to
weeks.
Get ourselves down. What
Yes,
you're
sir.
saying is we've got to take ourselves down roughly pretty quickly, $14 million to if we projected, I think at one time in the original spreadsheet, I think we're borrowing the entire amount, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
So
Yeah.
borrowing 41.5, which takes it to 60. So now if you're borrowing 27, that's 27 million. You're not going to go to 60. You're going to go, I don't know the math. But
I'm hoping we can get to a $35 million project. That's taking a $27 million loan and using $8 million of our funds.
our funds, and we're not, let's piggyback, because I didn't have our discuss that anymore.
Mm.
Where in regards to, don't want to say this too flippantly, so I got to be careful how I say it. Where in regards to our operational debt millage every year? Every year the board sets the operational debt millage for every year. Are we at our maximum, or do we have more room to go up without having to pass a special bill, without having to pass a millage? Do we have room on our mat that we're charging now? Do we have room to go up more?
I do not believe we do.
Okay, so we're at our max. Steve? 6.61 mils. That is the max. Correct. Okay.
Got to remember, we have what you said on the tax allocation board this last year,
Mhm.
where we said all the villages.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, though. We are, for the governmental operating expense, we are at our max. We can't, I know, what is it, county commission, medical care, they went up from 7 to 1, I think. So we don't have the
Yes.
option to go anymore. We are, boom, we're at our max. Okay, that takes
Correct.
that question off.
Correct.
I was just trying to figure out a way we can generate more revenue. We generate revenue or decrease expenses.
Those are the two things, yes.
Um,
And
so-
to your point, about 70% wages and benefits. So
70% more.
probably.
So, let's see. I think that for right now, I got wage turbines are step payments at 1.08. Increase in that. Okay, all right, that completes, on this first screen, completes our question. All right, next, please.
Okay, great. So, and these, again, the kind of the more of the details, you know, the revenues, I've got to hide you guys again so I could see my screen. You know, revenue projections, were, you know, here built on, 23, 24, and 25. Again, we kind of tried to split out the more higher profile revenues like the turbines and so forth. We actually built in that usage of fund balance into this, you know, into the, you know, this spreadsheet also. So as you can see here, a majority of the revenues, you know, the projections, you know, we're up to, you know, 2023, and we, you know, had some modifications here. As I think Nicole had mentioned previously, you know, we had the expectation of licenses and permits going up with you know, various different as those dollars continue to grow, and hopefully, you know, we'll see an increase in 2023. You know, of that about 260. Obviously that's a, you know, a small component of your total 22 million,
Yeah.
but still, you know, a component of that and some, you know, additional revenues there. This is a little bit unique because for the, as you can see, this line is intergovernmental, which that's all of your state and federal grants and so forth. So if you see this number here in 2022, very large, you know, little over $6 million. And it's, you know, as you go down to 2023, it's 3.7. But conceptually, what's in the 2022 number is utilization of the budgeted ARPA dollars that you had budgeted to use. You know, and so that is, so it's not just a normal, you know, we're not just going to see a normal increase in that, because those, you know, revenues are one-time utilizations for, Nicole, I don't remember exactly what they're all budgeted for, but
Well, almost $1 million in capital for the roof and the HVAC, and then some more for public safety payroll, a couple of servers, that type of thing, a little bit of salaries.
yeah, so that's why you see that big decrease, you know, is that was kind of a you know, a unique situation where we've, you know, that 2022 number of almost 6.1 million is you know, goes down in 2023 and then, you know, carries out into future years. So, and then the rest of them just a standard, you know, 2% is kind of what we built into the equation, you know, of increases there for some of those smaller revenues. And then various different things that we looked at for, as Commissioner Horton just mentioned, you know, increase in revenues or decrease in expenditures. You know, we looked at various different things, implementation of indirect costs. You know, as if you commissioners recall, when we implemented that several years ago, I don't recall how many years ago that's been, but we you know, the utilization was only on those larger components or larger funds, you know, Commission on Aging and Central Dispatch and so forth. But looking at that as a more across the board implementation of that indirect cost, you know, and so there's some various other funds and component units and so forth that we don't utilize the indirect cost on. So, looking at implementing that across the board would bring in some additional revenues to the general fund because they're costs that the general fund is incurring, and you have never gotten reimbursed for those. So that's kind of an implementation there. Increase in I think, down the road, increase to some of I know the sheriff is looking at the U.S. Marshal contracts. And so, so factoring in a variety of those, kinds of things into the revenues, is how we built, the 2023, 2024, and then 2025, so then all of those numbers obviously flow up and forward to that summary schedule that we looked at. Did I miss anything on revenues, Nicole, that we needed to discuss? I think I covered
I
everything.
don't think so. I think you got it.
Okay.
As far as
Okay.
revenue. Yeah.
Okay. So
Melissa?
Nope, that is it. I'm looking at our list that we have. Looks pretty good.
okay. Tried to hit all those. So,
Steve, Commissioner Jazinski has a question for you.
yes.
Just to comment on the indirect costs, you said there are some units that aren't contributing yet to that, so there might be some minor improvements to those revenues. It looks like we're covering right now the big ones that we're at other counties that usually get charged that. And it's those functions that get outside funding that don't really get the general fund that makes the big impact on the budget. But if we're applying that to a department that's basically getting general fund support, it's like putting in one pocket, taking out another. You don't
exactly
really
right.
gain that much. So I'm not sure what other departments we're looking at that we can incorporate that are outside of our general fund support.
Actually,
Yeah, there was a few on our seeing the list, but I think for various reasons it wasn't decided. There was a few more, but it was dollar amount was not a lot. Really.
yep, you're both exactly right. And it doesn't make any sense. All it does is inflate your revenues and inflate your expenditures when you pay yourself like that in the budget. But really the entities we looked at are outside entities. So it does take an appetite of the commission to charge those. This would be like for medical care facility. It would be for transportation commission. It would be for road commission. We do a lot of services. We perform a lot of services for them. We're a fiduciary for them, and in other counties, they are charged indirect costs. So that it wouldn't be, you nailed it. It's not internal departments. We've pretty much got the low hanging fruit there. Mhm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because I think that's the key in there is like, I think we use the example just because it's a small fund, I think is law library. Well, we send money over there and there is an indirect cost rate charge, so it wouldn't make sense to charge them the indirect cost. And then you'd have to increase the amount that you transfer out to them. So yeah, those were ones that we didn't, take into consideration because the net effect was minimal. Two, the net effect would net to basically zero in change for the general fund. Correct. Okay. So that's the revenue component. And that's pretty condensed. So there's not a whole lot of information there that's different. And then the expenditure, I know we touched on this already a little, but this is building, as you can see here, it's 3 years worth of audited information, 1 year of, unaudited. This isn't technically, they haven't officially issued the final yet. The draft was issued last week, but this is still technically unaudited. I don't think there's any, material changes. I think all of the entries, we factored those in and so forth. So those are, quote, unaudited numbers, but they're, that they're very accurate and then budgeted. And so then, the remainder of the 23, 24, 25, calculations are built off of those, budgeted numbers. And I know that's one thing. And I think Commissioner Horton, I think you may have said this, looking back, that was kind of the difficult part of, especially for salaries and benefits, the building of, of the projected numbers off of the past, and because that implementation of the, wage classification study was, would I be correct to say that was 2020 and 2021, or 19 and 20? 20 and 20. Okay. So, so to go back further, if you were to, truly take, well, what was our average increase in, and just because we're in the area of the sheriff's department, and to say, if you look here, it went, it's gone up, and everything, but going pre wage classification study and kind of mixing that average into the current is a little bit skewed, just because we had that jump up in the year of implementation and so forth. So so that makes it a little harder, and maybe once we get, and I think that's part of Nicole's drive, is to do this more frequently. Then we can build on that to be able to say, well, okay, we add the new year, and we're able to have a better average, going forward, to be able to look at, wow, from 19 to 20 it went up 8%, let's just say, whatever it was, to kind of, ramp in that wage classification, but on a quote normal increase, it isn't going to be 8%, or whatever, again, that's just, so I think that's kind of the difficulty of, because we're still in that, time period of implementation and so forth. So, but as far as expenditures, we'll kind of just go to the top here, and again, this projects, and I know, as you mentioned, and I think we're good with, definitely with the commissioner's discussion on with this implementation of this 1%, and it has all those varying changes. The theory is what we can do, and how it should work. I should be able to, but the lack of, or for illustration purposes, I guess, in the meeting, I mean, we could change that, and how it's supposed to work is it's supposed to flow to the front. So we should be able to see what a modification to any of those percentages would do. I feel, fingers crossed, I feel like of course, it's just like anything, you make a change and you get some sort of, funny numbers that flow. But I mean, the theory should be is that's what this tool is built for, is, as you, as commissioners, you make that determination. You say, oh, well, what was, if that was 0.5%, or if that was 1.5% or 2%, or, 0.8%, whatever, we in theory, should be able to, change this number, and it should work. Again, that would be, it's like performance anxiety. I don't know if I want to change that number in front of you guys and have it, but the theory is we should be able to change that number, and it should flow forward, and you should be able to see, what does 1.5% look like there, and that type of thing. That's how we've built the spreadsheet to work. And so those are things we can do, because it is a living document. We don't want to just, do it and put it on the shelf, and so I think that's the important part of, to keep in mind. So again, this takes into consideration, as we talked, that additional MERS payment, or additional MERS increase, for 23, 24, 25, of that 280,000, the general fund component of that. And then, it continues to project forward, all the various different departments. I mean, I won't go through all these, because basically, again, conceptually, I mean, here's a real easy one to see. Jury board, $1,000 of jury board for a 1% increase to jury board is $10, and so that number goes up to 1,010. So that's conceptually how it works. That's an easy one to, so you all can see how, those calculations are working.
we're gonna get to the behind, like, it's like, what is it? Let's make a deal. What's behind door number 2? What's gonna go on year 4, 5, 6, and 7? I mean,
Yes.
where's our slide? I know we're gonna be sliding, so let's see it.
And yeah, and I can, actually, Melissa just emailed it to me, so
Okay.
if
do you
I
want me to-
stop, yeah, you can stop
okay.
your share
There you
and
go.
then, I should, drum roll. Let me share this and,
Oh, we got- I'm sorry, Steve, Commissioner Jelezinski has a question for you on expenditure.
I was looking at the sheriff's office projection for the next 3 years. I know we've been talking about the cost of the project, but I don't think we ever had anything from the sheriff's office in terms of a impact budget that the capital improvement project would bring about, in terms of additional staff, additional vehicles that might be needed because it's off-site. Is that factored into the sheriff's office projection?
Yes, yes. And
you can
and I
go
know-
ahead and share again, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it hadn't gotten, let's scroll down. So in 305, I believe it is. We're getting there. Hold on.
351.
351. Okay. I knew it had a 3 and a 5 in it. I just wasn't sure. There we go. So, so we built in, an increase here of, so 2023 really, again, didn't change 2023, just use the normal percentages just because of, the facility wouldn't be online yet. And then with the expectation of in 2024 and 2024, probably getting online. And then, 2025, again, we did factor in, 5 and 10% there, and then 10 and 20% into 2025. Again, our best estimate, Commissioner. Yep.
I think since Steve has it up on the screen, I
Oh.
ought to explain the community development decrease of 21% in wages, because that might be alarming to anybody out there who's seeing that. All that is just a budget tool of taking that community development director wages and applying some of those wages, taking them out of the inspections fund. Right now, all of the wages are attributed to general fund. It certainly doesn't make sense. Obviously, the director, directs inspection operations as well. And so that's what that wage decrease is. I just didn't want to alarm anybody out there in Zoom land.
Yeah. And I think that's, that is a key. I think that, and I know Commissioner Horton has said this and it's been said in various different commissioners, but, it's looking at everything, it's not, well, that's just the way it's been done. We really looked at, a variety of options, and said, well, why are we doing it that way? And well, that's the way it's always been done. Well, but why, and does that seem logical? And well, no, that doesn't seem logical. And let's make some changes. So, those are areas that I feel like, this exercise was very good because we looked at a lot of those areas that, that probably should have been looked at, a while ago. And I think we came up with some very logical modifications.
Agreed. And that's why, part of why this exercise was necessary. When the financial advisor got a hold of our financials, he was taking these last couple of years, rightfully so, and projecting them forward. Well, as Steve mentioned, that influx of ARP dollars the last few years, these were not the 2 years to project forward. That is definitely an error. We could have, and USDA would have said, oh, great, these are fine looking spreadsheets. But because the accountants, because I knew, because Steve knew, the other details, we felt like we needed to build that in. So this is the going out 10-year projection where I say it is getting better. Obviously we are looking at a hefty use of fund balance each year going forward until 2032. But that's when, we're getting out there where those MERS payments are long dropped off, and the 10-year actually works. We actually get to the point where we're not utilizing fund balance. And we get to the point where Steve talked about, we actually start to recoup that fund balance and actually add to.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Nicole, on this, is this the one does this take into consideration? I was just looking for okay, it does take into consideration the added MERS. I wasn't sure if this was the Baker Tilly model or which they had you take that out of their computation just because it was, they had a different philosophy there. So, but okay, I'm sorry.
Yes, and we were, in that added MERS payment, all that is taking, what we believe our MERS payments will be now and building in the knowledge that those are going to increase. They're not going to be what MERS promised us that they were.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
On the use of the fund balance, where does this leave us? You're going into, let's see. The last forward looks like it's 3031. Everything goes correct. You're pulling from your fund balance. Where does that leave the fund balance? What percentage or where does that leave fund balance after 3031? Where do you sitting at fund balance projected out? Because obviously you're not putting it back in. So where's the dollar amount? Because I don't have it.
Right, I'm, Melissa, as I look at this, what is and this might be the answer, because I thought we were recouping fund balance sooner, like in the 10-year, I thought we were recouping fund balance. So help me, why is this transfer out bump up to 2.4 in 2028? Does that have the bond payment in there again?
Yes.
Thank
I
you. 'Cause
think
I'm looking at this
yep.
going, guys, I felt a lot better about this 10-year than I'm feeling right now. I think.
Yes, you are right. If you wanna, I will update that because you see, I put the bond payment is for 2028, 1008, did not take it out of the 2.4. So, abort, unshare, I can update that. And then I can give it back to you. Good catch, Commissioner. I was updating this and I looked at everything thinking I got it right there, but let me take it out of that bottom line there for you. And, I can have that sent back to Nicole
Can you
shortly.
resend that?
Yep, I apologize for that. Good.
Oh,
good
hey,
catch.
this is why these exercises are good.
That's why I didn't want to make that change to 2% on the other spreadsheet, just because, that's, you think you capture everything. And that's why it's good to have, many eyes looking at things and many smart brains thinking of things.
Steve, Commissioner Hope, or Chairman Hope has a question for you.
Mhm.
Steve, I guess as to Commissioner Horton's question about the remaining fund balance, can a line be added to show that along with where that balance goes along with each year?
Yeah.
To see, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's good. I mean, I tried to do that and I feel like I made it overly complex and Melissa and Nicole looked at it and said, what are you doing? And so no, I tried to do that and try to factor it in but I couldn't make it look logical. And so, yeah, I think we can look at that and make some modifications to that to factor that in. So you all can see that. Agreed.
Thanks.
Melissa, were you resending that now? You're muted.
I am. I'm updating it currently and I will resend it now. If you give me just a few minutes.
So just to mention, and because I did it since I'm not screen sharing, so you all couldn't see it, but I plugged in a different percentage and it appears to flow correctly to the front. So it has about $100,000 impact, give or take, and on if you make a modification to to that 1%, if you jump it up to 2%. it appears to flow correctly. I'd want to prove that out and make sure the, the math, works and so forth, but just as a point of reference, if as we utilize this document, going forward and you, gentlemen say, hey, what does that do if we did this? It looks like that, 1% increase is about $100,000.
I'm not gonna ask the question at this meeting, but the 1%, I'm not gonna ask what percentage you used every year to calculate like a cost of living adjustment or anything like that, or a wage classification. And I think it would be good on this board, maybe this committee in years going forward to, if we're basing everything off of 1%, what has to go in, what has to go out to make the 1%? I mean, so that, I guess that's something that would be probably a good tool for this board to concentrate on, for, call it a discussion on the 1%, or something like that, where, okay, we're projecting this, so we can do, we're comfortable in recommending this, or healthcare went up this, we better not do this, and so, and be totally transparent about it, because you're looking 10 years, 20 years into the future, and, you don't want to be short-sighted, in your projection. You don't want to give something up front just to, appease, but at the same time, you sometimes have to get something up front if you, like for now, with the labor issues going on in our society. You have to recruit, you have to retain. That may change 5 years from now. You don't know. Maybe we don't need as many people because of Zooming. You just don't know that. So I think having that discussion, having a number going forward in everything is a good tool to kind of, I don't want to say manage, but it's a good starting point. So anyway, that's all I have. So
Yeah, we know it'll
Melissa,
keep
did I
us
give you enough
in.
time to make those corrections. I kind of stressed it.
Well, keep us in that revenue and expenditure.
Commissioner Jones has a question too.
I'll give Melissa a little more time. What are your
Yes, they
assumptions-
are on their way to Nicole now. So go ahead, Nicole, you should have them.
What are your assumptions for the healthcare benefit? I know we've been trying to keep costs minimal for staff, but looking at continuing that or a gradual increase.
Well, it's tough, right? Because we have a Cadillac plan, and we want that to continue. We have low cost shares and we want that to continue. And those two things are tough to continue on the same path. So health insurance is incredibly important to so many of our employees. And I think what you might see going forward are more options for employees. Maybe the cost shares are more right sized, but that employees would have more options available to them to help them right size it for their family.
I know we're, again, inflationary period, which hopefully flattens out at some point, but I do have two daughter-in-laws, one's a doctor, one's a nurse. And I hear about the challenges faced by that profession, lack of replacement employees in those professions.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking those costs are gonna probably go up considerably in the future.
Agreed. And I think, one thing that Melissa and Steve and Chris and I talked about going through this exercise was if we had done this exercise 4 years ago, no one would ever have known the ARP dollars were going to come. What an influx of opportunity for us. Every day things change, right? There's no guarantees built into this model, but just a level of comfort. To Commissioner Horton's point, yes, a 1% equates to this. And maybe it's not a 1% wage increase, but maybe this and this need to happen to, where the whole salary is increased by 1. And at least using this tool gives us hey guys, we got to stay under these expenditures. Hey guys, we need to get in these revenues. And if we're not falling within our forecast, then something's going to change, right? So it's a tool.
How unlikely.
Yes.
I mean, I certainly don't like
Yes.
it in my life, my own personal life,
Yeah.
in my life. You can't spend that. Okay.
Yes.
You
It's a
know,
governor.
But you got, that's reality. It
Yes.
really is. All right.
Okay.
you got-
We
There you
do,
go.
we do. Okay, does this look a little better, folks? This looks a little more like what I expected to see this morning. Those years of fund balance that I just highlighted, total, let me look. Total 4.170 million. And you can see the bottom, bottom of the screen, where this essentially is what we're adding to fund balance each year. Over that 10-year is 4.2 million. And so that's where I was saying, even the fund balance we're having to use in these upcoming years, we are recouping that back in this 10-year forecast.
Yep.
And this is why the 5-year just wouldn't work. We just couldn't make a 5-year work. But when you, even projecting the wages forward, even projecting capital forward, even projecting those MERS payments going up in the recent years, once those start to drop off, that's really our saving grace going forward. You can see the wind turbine revenues are leveling out in that second column too. So this is when I finally felt comfortable that yes, we can, the general fund has some breathing room.
And this is not taking the project from 41.5 to 35 and then 35 to a low.
That is correct. That is correct.
That's the assumption we're taking.
Yes, sir.
You
And
feel
pretty,
comfortable if you can do that?
we do, again, no guarantees, but a level of comfort with this, yes. When the first time we did this exercise and we were coming in fiscal 23, $500,000 in the hole before any kind of project bond payment. But because of the things we've talked about today, because of some of the assumptions, not filling certain positions, taking wages out of general fund and putting them somewhere else. Obviously, this is a big look at the MRF and a big target on the $450,000 allocation. That falls off in this projection. So that either means the MRF becomes self-sustaining or it closes its doors, which we believe the future of the MRF, the future of the MRF is one of those things.
What about, and this, especially in regards to timing? Where are you at with the timing of USDA loan? Are you still on track to get it approved for, was it May we had to have approval or to lock in our lower rate? Where are we at with that?
We have to have approval in March to lock in the current 2.125%
Okay.
rate. We know that's going up April 1st for USDA, which will equate to, even if it's 0.25%, that'll equate to millions of dollars
That's
over
what
the
I
life
know,
of the
is that
loan.
where are we at? Because we don't want to add 2 million into this. that
We
we're-
can't, correct. So USDA has everything they need to head to DC to make this request. USDA is making that request, I believe, in March. And what USDA rep had told us is that if she had everything to her by end of February, she thought that was an okay timeline to get this locked in. Now, we are still moving ahead with USDA with a $41.5 million loan. That's what that's what the project has been. That's what we're inserted in their system for. But if they're successful in getting the $41.5 million for Isabella County, we can de-obligate funds later. But this would lock us in at that 2.125%.
Well, that
So
makes sense because it is. I've got home remodels, just on the home remodels, you can factor in a percentage of incomes.
mhm,
So I know we have good intentions of going down to 35, but if it goes into 36, we're not paying percentages more on a loan. We have that locked in, is what you're saying. So we have, for lack of a better term, a draw of that much, but we're not.
correct. And funny, USDA, the way they work, if if the interest rate were to go down going forward, we would get the new lower interest rate, but if it goes up, we're actually locked into the 2.125. So it's the best of both worlds there.
I guess it's not really on this, but looking at the impact on that jail project, have you had a consultation with the consultants on the realities of what we're looking at to see if there could be a reduction?
Yes, sir. They've known from me that there's some concerns going forward about the $41.5 million budget. So they are actually working hard to bid the project out right now. Seems kind of funny. You'd think that things would just kind of pause, but instead it looks like they're on track to go out for bids March 4th, I believe. And that will tell them exactly where the project is costing currently. Remember when it first came out, it was about 60 million and they did what they call a value engineering exercise and pulled all the low hanging fruit. I think there is no more low hanging fruit with that project, but got us down into closer to that $40 million range. So once those bids come in, they'll know exactly where we sit as far as current costs, because since that first value engineering exercise, costs have only increased for us, right? That was a few years ago, and supply chain issues and COVID and all these things have happened. So they will bid this out to find out where we're at. And then if again, I'm hoping for a $35 million project, because I believe a $27 million borrow is what we can afford. And that would, we would need the appetite of the board to utilize $8 million of ARPA funds towards it to come up to the 35. But the construction manager, architect, engineer are aware that the project is likely to change. It's not been a honeymoon. No honeymoon at all. Steve, I saw you hop off, but hop back on. Thank you so much for going through that. And this has been part of the urgency to get this model back on track so that we could understand what is the dollar figure we're looking at, so that we could get, USDA, please lock us in. This is where we're at.
Yeah, and I think, the key is to talk about, the utilization of ARPA dollars. I think the key will be is that we utilize them in accordance with the act and so forth. And so, if that means utilization of those dollars for general government operations, and that's that, as you've talked, that's that lost revenue standard deduction or allowance, standard allowance of $10 million. And if you utilize that in accordance with the act to fund general governmental operations, those free up dollars, local dollars, to be utilized for the project. I think that's the key, is that we assure that that we expend those dollars in accordance with the act. And like I said, I think that frees up dollars for utilization of this project. So I think that's a great utilization. It's changing for the future, and I think that's good.
I have a comment from this board, and I'm going to direct it to our chairperson and our administrator. I would like to see this 3-year financial maybe presented to the full board. I think it would, but obviously we delved down into some stuff. If you try to do it the full board, we're told we'd be banging his gavel at the end of business meeting at 7 or 10 like I did last one. But I'd like to see it presented to the full board, i.e. then presented to the whole general public, because they need to know if our plan is to go from 41.5 to 35 and to use our money. I think those are big things to get out there, because and the rest of the community knows that the county is going to spend the ARPA.
Yes.
And so the other entities that received it can plan accordingly. I just think that we've known for a long time this has to be done. I'm glad to see this. Again, everything is like it always is. Depends which way the wind. I see. But it's all spreadsheeted out in Excel, and change 1 to 1.1 and look at the numbers.
Yep.
That's just great. You just never know. I like to look back and look forward and plan, but again, we can't look back at one of the big components because we had a big increase 2 years ago or a year ago. So we've got limited numbers, some good guesses maybe. But I think we need to present this maybe 2 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe when we get the turbine monies in. You know, I wouldn't probably plan for the next board meeting. I think that's a little tight on time.
We have a light agenda though.
But
If you think, I mean, there's no
If you're gonna-
CJ, this is all there is for finance
But
and
would we know that component of the?
The
wind turbine
turbines?
revenues?
I'll know by Friday if we do, you know what I mean? I'll know by this Friday if,
like I said, I
we
think,
do.
you know, throwing it off to the chairperson, and kind of administrative controller, because I think it's just something necessary to be seen. I think there's still a lot of unknowns, with DTRF one.
Mhm.
That's a lot, that's the treasurer has stated before some of his concerns, and I do share those. And we will talk about that. I do share those, some of the unknowns, going forward as far as liabilities to the county possibly, we don't know that. I think we have some protection in certain areas, so I won't go into that right now, but, again, it's all a projection, but I think bottom line is, I think we need to be transparent for that overused word. And get that out there. Commissioner Delzowski.
I agree with Commissioner Horton, and if we could do it at the next meeting, which is a light agenda, that'd be great. I think the sooner the board knows some of the realities, maybe some more thoughts can come into play and maybe some more solutions. But it does say to the board, we need to be awful disciplined as we move forward on the budget.
Not just the board, to the public. I mean, the
public,
public needs to, or not our public, when I say the public, that's the groups of people that put us here to sit in these chairs today. Is that they need to know what we're doing and that we're trying to make the most educated possible things for their tax dollars. Because we don't know what's gonna happen. You just don't. And, you know, we're making lemonade right now out of a lemon that we had for the last 2 years plus. So, you know, we're just trying to do the best we can with what we have to work with.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think the rest of the board needs to get in on this as soon as possible and be able to chime in, as Commissioner Jasinski said. And if we aren't 100% sure on the wind turbine revenues, we can express that
Yeah.
view. You know, this is what we think will come in, but we haven't had time to really look at it and see if that's an accurate number, so that may fluctuate.
Yes.
Do we have anything else to add in the 3-year financial forecast presentation and discussion?
Anything else from you, Steve? I think we're good. I think you
Nope, yeah.
covered it.
Your
Thank
wife-
you.
Has your wife got the laundry done, Steve, and breakfast made?
Yeah, we already had breakfast, but yeah, I think I hear the washer running right now. So
Okay,
yeah.
well then, get those hiking boots cleaned off, get ready to go.
I'm sure
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
one of the highlights of your vacation.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you for
Yeah.
sharing your vacation with us.
Well, that's okay.
Absolutely.
Those corrections on the fly. Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Yes.
Okay, we don't, that's just a discussion, so we'll move now down to invoice list discussion. Commissioners, anything you saw on the invoice list?
I got some-
I just, yeah, we have taxes for $1 amounts, but it is what it is, so. Okay, I have nothing, then we'll call for the public.
Mhm.
Okay, anything, anybody on the public?
There's no one at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, commissioners, anything? Nothing, so at 11:37 at the call of the chair, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, Steve. Thanks again.
You bet.